Hi, and welcome back to ADK Talks, the podcast that brings you the best of the amazing and multifaceted Adirondack Park. I'm your host, Jane, along with my co-host and brother, Steve. Say hi, Steve.
Hi, Steve.
You always have a different voice for that, don't you? Anyway, on today's episode, we're exploring a different way of thinking about the Adirondacks, not just as a destination, but also as a place to learn. On 6 million acres in upstate New York, the Adirondack Park is the largest protected landscape in the contiguous United States. It's a place where wilderness and working communities exist side by side, where questions about land use, conservation, and sustainability aren't theoretical, they're lived. And for a small group of college students every fall semester, the Adirondacks become something even more, a classroom. Today, we're joined by Jacob McCoola, Director of Outdoor Leadership in the Adirondack semester at St. Lawrence University, along with Nicole Panek, Assistant Director and a former student of the program. Together, they're going to take us inside an immersive, off-grid educational experience where students live in a yurt village, unplug from technology, and learn through direct engagement with the landscape and each other. Jacob, Nicole, welcome to ADK Talks.
Thanks for having us.
True confession, this was actually on my original list of topics and guests we wanted to have when we started this podcast over a year ago. So I'm super thrilled to have you guys on today. Jacob, let's set the table, as it were, for our listeners. We're going to get into lots of detail about the program in the Adirondack semester, but let's just give our folks some context. Can you describe for our listeners what the program is in a nutshell?
Yeah, so every fall semester at St. Lawrence University, we take 12 students in sort of like a pseudo study abroad program where they're studying off campus and they do an entire semester in the woods on Massawepie Lake in the Adirondacks. They're living in yurts. Their classroom is usually the outdoors or in what we call lovingly the learning yurt, the library yurt, the yurt. And they're, pretty insulated. So they're creating their own culture and they're doing this whole semester, without phones, without computers, without technology, or at least, high technologies we can maybe consider it in our society today. It's the most magical learning experience I've ever been a part of.
That's amazing. What brought you to outdoor education?
Yeah, to make a long story somewhat short, I grew up in Glens Falls, New York, just south of the Adirondack Park. And when I was 14, a freshman in high school, I got a job as a ski instructor at West Mountain. So for those of you who have never skied at West Mountain, it's a fantastic little ski area. And they've got night skiing. So every day after school, I would go up and I would teach skiing to local youth in the community. And I realized it was the most fun thing to do is to share this passion for movement and flow and landscape. And I realized as I was teaching that a lot of the facilitation of the learning was really just about choosing the correct place on the mountain to bring my students to. And then they would figure it out from there, right? I would give them little nudges, little pushes, a little bit of chances for reflection. But if I took them to a steep slope and said okay, think about this. And they would figure it out, how to navigate the steep slope. And so I realized that the place was really the teacher and I was just someone who was guiding them through this experience. And that was so powerful for me as a high schooler, thinking about learning in a different way than I'd experienced it. Right? I've been, in public school, we're just sitting in classrooms, kind of absorbing what our teachers are saying. And I was like, wait, this is a different way that to experience this. And so that kind of started me off on a long journey of pursuing this kind of connection between place and education. And I went out to Colorado for a good long while and studied outdoor education and sustainability. And I ended up in Portland, Oregon for a while studying kind of administrative policy and leadership for sustainability education. But kind of the pathway was always guided by this intersection of place, education, and how to use outdoor education as a medium to practice these patterns of behavior that are, would foster the kind of communities and world I want to be a part of. So how do we practice things as humans that will, make sense in the world?
That's amazing. That's such a neat way to think about it. Nicole, you have a unique perspective because you're both a former student and participant in the semester, and now you're a member of the team that directs the program. What drew you to the Adirondack semester as a student?
Yeah, so I did the program in 2018 when I was a junior in college, and I was drawn to it partly for the fact that I could leave my phone away. It's how often I think in this modern world do you get to have the opportunity to put your phone in a box and be gone for 4 months or be away from it. And that's just something I didn't think I'd get the opportunity to do again. And even from my first glimpse at St. Lawrence when I was a freshman doing a pre-trip, which is essentially before you start on campus. You can go backpacking or canoeing or rock climbing with a few other upperclassmen and kind of get a sense for what the community is like, what the Adirondacks are like. And both of the guides on my trip had done the semester, and they both were just really thoughtful, articulate people, and also spoke so highly of the transformational aspect of the semester. And again, I kept meeting folks on campus who had done it, who just had this like sense of who they were. And I kind of wanted to see what that was like. And yeah, again, well, how could I not?
I'm curious, I did a semester abroad, and, it was before the internet. I won't tell you when exactly because I'm not going to date myself. But, my parents were really encouraged me to do it. What was your parents' reaction when you told them I want to go into the woods?
Yeah, especially since there's no contact, right? I mean,
right.
Parents nowadays freak out if they can't.
Helicopter parents, and that whole thing.
Yeah, I think I wrote my parents maybe like 2 or 3 letters the whole time, maybe twice too. Students can canoe across the lake, it takes about 20-25 minutes, and then there's a old Boy Scout cabin we leave a flip phone there. So if they want to call their parents, they can go use the flip phone. And I had a little book with all the phone numbers that I needed to remember. But my parents thought I was they were like, couldn't really believe that it's something I'd want to do, especially if the other options were to go to like Japan or Denmark or all these other abroad opportunities. But I was really lucky. I went to a public high school in Rhode Island that had a German exchange. So through this public school with public funding, I was able to spend a month in Germany. So in some ways, I already had this like connection and opportunity. And I could kind of trust in my ability to, if I really wanted to live somewhere else or explore these other, again, like trusting in my ability to figure that out. But again, it was just like, maybe I can live abroad at some point in my life. But again, really, how am I going to function in this world and live in the woods for a month?
That's a really good way to think about it.
Yeah.
That's a really good way to think about it. For many people, the Adirondacks are a place to vacation, right? So Jacob, you're asking students to treat it as a classroom. What makes the Adirondacks such a powerful place for learning?
Yeah, I think on a large scale, just the beautiful balance of like wilder spaces and also like nooks of humanity and civilization, right? Like the land management plan is really unique. And so, having an opportunity for students to like explore that land management plan in a very visceral way and actually like, tour, a lot of times in their classes, they'll go on field trips and they'll go visit Wanakina or Saranac Lake or Tupper Lake. But they'll also go to old growth forests and study elevational changes on whiteface. And so there's like so much access to like this blend of human and nature kind of interface, if we can separate those things in our minds a little bit right here. And so I think that big scale, that's kind of what I'm thinking about, but also just the uniqueness of the Arcadias, which is what we call the yurt village that the students inhabit for the semester. And I think on a smaller scale, it's just such a radical model for education where the students are living, cooking for each other, learning with each other, navigating conflict with each other. It's like a very insulated environment that really fosters like this really deep depth. I'm going to go there and say that it's a deep depth of like transformation. And so the Adirondacks are a place where we can like set that up and they can have access to this like vast ecological landscape and also this very intimate social landscape.
That's so cool. Are students from a variety of majors or particular, are they ecology majors? What's the typical student, or is there a typical student?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say, no, there's no typical student. We definitely have trends that we've seen. So, we oftentimes get a lot of environmental studies students, conservation biology, that sort of thing. And also we get computer science and cybersecurity and neuroscience and like students from across the board. And I think a lot of times there are these students that live on campus and are, going through these more, maybe less adjacent majors, right? Areas of study. And they realize like, wait, but like, when am I ever going to get to do this again? When am I going to get to like live in the woods without a phone if I'm going to be in tech, right? There's not going to be an opportunity for that really, unless it'll be hard to find, right? And so I think oftentimes we get these students from these non-adjacent disciplines that come in and are really excited for the opportunity as well.
Yeah, I was a math major, so.
Oh, wow. Oh, I just, as you were describing it, I was thinking, what a powerful story that would make in an interview after college, about that experience and how resilient you are and willing to take, I wouldn't say a risk, but a chance or try something completely different and really challenge yourself. So
absolutely.
Any future any current college students or future college students, I think I just made a plug for your program and how it'll help them, become an investment banker at Goldman Sachs or something.
But I think one of the frameworks, the Adirondack semester lives within the outdoor leadership department here at St. Lawrence. And, our goal in outdoor leadership is to use, again, outdoor education and recreation as a medium to practice these like very specific human skills that are applied to anything, right? And so in the outdoor leadership, we're just looking how to, navigate risk, communicate, manage conflict, right? There are these very human skills that can be applied for, Wall Street bankers or managers or nonprofit leaders or field scientists, doctors, whatever you're doing, you can apply these skills that we're fostering. And so we really, it's a big sell, but it's also just like real too.
That's cool. Let's just talk about some of the nuts and bolts. So it's in the fall. Are they going there the first day of the fall semester, or do they spend a little time, do some prep on campus first and then head into the woods?
We actually start by meeting offsite. We spend a couple days with them, just getting to know them, giving them a chance to get to know each other. And they do a wilderness first aid course, so learning some basic safety skills. And then we actually take them on a 7-day canoe trip through the Adirondacks that ends at the Adirondack semester site. And so in some ways, it gives them a chance to, again, get to know each other, start building community. The other assistant director and I spent a lot of time with them building community and community values and talking about intentionality in those spaces and consensus-based leadership. And also, they're just like practicing canoe skills.
I was just going to ask that. Did you know how to canoe and kayak before you went?
I knew a little bit about canoeing, but not a lot. We have plenty of students who've never kayaked before, who've never backpacked before or like slept outside for more than one night.
Oh, wow.
So some of it's just a big, like, how do you set up a tent? How do you set up a stove? And how do you cook outside? That's a big thing. A lot of students have never like really cooked either in general or in the wilderness. So it's a lot of those like hard skills that they're learning. Same with like leave no trace and how do you steward the land that you're recreating on and respect the land and kind of work with that. But also it gives them a chance then after 7 days showing up in a yurt village. What's already a kind of a challenging environment to be in is a little easier. It's like, oh, well, at least I'm sleeping in a yurt, not a tent.
Yeah,
Or like,
yeah.
But yeah, the first time they see it is actually after the longest kind of hardest day of the backpacking trip. They go through an area that the only people who paddle this are Adirondack semester students and staff. It's called Dead Creek. It's in Tupper Lake, and it's this beautiful little creek that's quite challenging to canoe just because it's very winding. There's sometimes elderberries, though, which is really fun and wonderful. But it's this very hard paddle, and then they have to portage the canoe 2 miles, and then their last bit of that hard day is paddling up, and you can see just the solar panels that we have and maybe some other alumni from the program who come in to cook for the students that first night, waving and jumping at the dock. And it's a really special and usually impactful moment for the students as they arrive.
That's very cool. And how many yurts make up the yurt village?
Yeah, great question. We have an assortment. So each student group, we have kind of co-ed living situations where 3 students will share, I think it's a 14-foot yurt total or 16-foot yurt. And so that's kind of like dorm style living. They have sleeping pads on the floor. And again, one of our values is simplicity. So they don't have room for a lot of stuff, but they can bring kind of what they need and a couple little luxuries. And so with 12 students, we've got 4 student yurts. We also have 2 yurts for the director team to inhabit when they're there. And then we have what's called the community yurt or CURT. And this is a space for kind of students to congregate, play games. There's a costume box, there's couches. And this is a place, again, there's not a lot of like personal space. And this is a place for them to come. It's a heated space, the wood stove. We also have the learning yurt, which is our yurt, and it has a shelf of books, a whiteboard, a dictionary, because again, they're not doing any, computering. They're doing all their homework by hand without computers. And so there's thesauruses, dictionaries, a lot of reference books, a whiteboard. And so usually if it's raining really hard and we won't do class outside, we'll do our classes in the yurt. So those are the yurts. We also have a wood-fired sauna on the property too, so that's oftentimes how students stay clean. They'll jump in the sauna to warm up, and they'll go rinse in the lake, and they'll soap up on shore and jump back in the sauna again. We've got a composting toilet system, so a 2-stall Clivus Multrum system, and then we've got a timber frame small kitchen. And so it's all off-grid. We have some solar panel power. We haul in water from the lake, and that's kind of the infrastructure we have available to us.
Nicole, what was it like to step into that environment as a student?
really new. It's funny when I think about and try to remember my first glimpse. Again, it's after this long canoe trip. Just being amazed by the trees on site. You have these like cathedral-like white pines and hemlocks within and around the yurt village. And so, like, I remember like standing up, if you're looking in the middle of the village and look up, you kind of, what you see are these kind of pillars of trees. And it really does feel like this environment that you're living in is really integrated with this little corner of Massawepie Lake. And so much of the day-to-day life involves navigating around these trees and through them. And it really blends this idea of like, yes, this is a yurt. This is a structure that's been put here and built. But just as much as the yurt is part of where I'm living in this space is this tree that I have to walk around if I'm carrying water, and it makes the walk just slightly longer. And that's a lot of what makes a big difference in those couple extra steps. And it's that integration was something that really struck me as a student.
That's really cool. I have two close friends from Kansas City who came to visit me this summer because I don't think they could believe that I'd actually moved up here from New York. But we were going somewhere doing something, and one of them just said, "There's so many trees." And I just thought I never thought about it like that. But for people who haven't been here before, and we have a lot of listeners from all over the country, it is pretty awe-inspiring when the density of the forest and how much of it is wild. That's really cool.
And these students are getting to know these trees like very intimately, right? Like as Nicole said, like walking around them every single day, but also in their studies, they're doing phenology projects where they're, choosing 10 trees in the village and seeing how they shift over the course of a fall and how often they leave their leaves and how fast. But it's also just like sitting next to them, right? One of their homework assignments for the class I teach called Knowing Nature is they do an hour of sitting a week, just out without a journal, just like sitting in the woods. And oftentimes they're sitting next to the same tree every day. And so they're kind of getting the sense of like, yeah, who is this tree that I'm sitting next to every single day for 3.5 months, right? It's this really intimate knowledge of this landscape that I think very few people in our day and age kind of get an opportunity to engage in.
Do you identify the trees by name? Have trees been named or rocks been named or anything like that?
That's a good question. And I think if they are, maybe they're personal names. There's definitely some rocks that have names out there for sure, though.
Too, also the lake and the back dock becomes a really special place for a lot of students because one, the sonning and jumping in the lake is this really impactful experience that a lot of people haven't done. It's pretty intense. It's also it's a real community space for students because, like, obviously we all stay pretty far away from it as a director team. And they have kind of conversations there and connections there. But like as a student, I did that kind of like hour of time from standing in the lake over there and just the shifting of like watching how stars reflect differently or weather changes. Again, you just become because also you're impacted with how, if it's raining, if it's not, you can really feel it get colder and colder as the fall goes on. You become so much more aware too of your surroundings. And I know like still that place is a very special place in my heart.
Did it snow during your semester?
Oh yeah.
Were you ready for it?
Enough. You figure it out.
Enough. You had the warm clothes and stuff like that.
Yeah, and we give students a pretty clear list of here's what we recommend.
I bet.
If you don't have access to these things, we can lend them to you. We can borrow them. We can pick them up. So we do a pretty good job of both having them set up for success and also providing ways in which we can support those who might already have access to them. And there's also a thrift store in Pepper Lake that they get to go into town every 2 weeks after chores.
I've been there. That huge thrift store.
Thrifty Nifty.
Yeah. It's sort of across the street from the donut shop.
Yeah, so they'll get a donut, they'll go in, and they'll come back with new sweaters and very excitedly wear. Also, students, I think, enjoy wearing the same kind of things and that simplicity of, I put the same sweater on every day, and now it's getting colder, so I put a second one over that.
If I can just do one more winter note real fast, this last winter, as you know, was really, really, really wintry. And so by the end of the semester, students were we can't drive to the village. So there's a 1/4-mile trail around the cove that'll get you there, or we have a barge set up so we can carry in firewood and supplies and our CSA share. When we were actually breaking the ice across the cove in front of the barge to get out the last day when we were winterizing. So definitely a winter experience at the end there.
Yeah. And if you've read Anne LaBastille's Woodswoman, she talks about, she built a cabin on Twitchell Lake, which in a book she fictionalized it as, I think, Big Bear. She talks about, and you could only get to it by boat. And, that time between the end of fall and before winter, before it freezes solid and she could walk across it, was always really scary and always terrified of her boat breaking down on, during that trip back or forth in a November or early December. So that's crazy. Tell me about the wildlife. We've talked about the great nature, and you're like in the darkest of dark skies. The stars must be incredible at the Yurt Village. But what kind of wildlife encounters did you have?
I mean, honestly, like one of the goals is to have the students become wildlife, right? A little bit. So we're all kind of wildlife out there.
I thought college students already were sort of wildlife, but
we just give them the space to really feel it.
To really go feral. Okay.
Yeah, but more seriously, we often have, weasels that come through. We have a lot of squirrels. We get the jays that come through at a specific time every year. There's a bear that we've seen around the lake, but never nearby our village. And so we oftentimes see scat and prints across the lake.
Otters will make a visit. Beavers. We also have loons, and I think loons are maybe one of the non-human beings that are most present and most felt because you hear their calls.
I can't wait for the loons to come back.
And most nights you'll hear them. There's like this year, there was 2 baby loons and the 2 parents that were residents of our lake.
Yeah, and they were living like right off the dock. So like you'd go and fill up your water jugs in the morning. The little loon family would be hanging out there, and it was so sweet to see.
That's awesome.
For someone, a college-age student who's never heard a loon call, particularly early in the morning or late at dusk, and that's got to be quite the awakening, or quite the experience for somebody that's from Long Island has never heard a loon. It's like, what the heck is that?
But I think it adds this sense of like the landscape is so magical, and that's like one of the goals of the program is to show the magic that lives kind of in this world that we're in.
It's such an eerie, beautiful sound, and I think whether or not you at first are freaked out or at first in awe, it comes to be such a familiar sound too, that there's whichever spot you start with, it develops into something that's just a part of the landscape.
So they get there. Is there a little bit of culture shock as the only phrase I can think of it? And how do they adapt? How did you adapt to it, Nicole?
In some ways, you're really expected to jump in, and curiosity is a really valuable skill to cultivate for this semester. Learning to choose curiosity and choose to jump in and maybe be wrong or make mistakes, but try it. Students are intimately involved with the upkeep of the site as well. So one of the first things you do when you arrive is you get a big tour and you get shown this is the composting toilet. This is how it works. Here's the water jugs. Here's how you fill it up. Here's how you flush the filter that we get our water from. Here's the point where you want to make sure it's always full too. And it's your responsibility to be carrying those jugs and filling it up. Here's how we do dishes. Here's where the vegetables are kept. It's your job to check and see which ones are starting to go bad. And if it's your turn to cook that night, you're going to try to use those first. And I think there's this responsibility that they're given right away. And they really run with that and take that on.
Yeah, and it's also, one of the pitches I make for student when I visit classes to try to recruit for this program is that, most study abroad programs, if you want to learn the French culture, the best place to go is, to France or a French speaking country. And if you want to learn Spanish, go to Spain or go to somewhere in Latin America. And for the Adirondack semester, and like each of those experiences will have, an appropriate culture shock that you get there and it's like a different place, different people, different world, different landscape. And the Adirondacks is definitely that, but it's also an opportunity for students to create their own culture. And so they arrive, and as Nicole says, they're like learning how the village works, but they're also doing meetings every single week on Wednesday evenings. Nicole and her coworker, Nate Trachty, facilitate like a community meeting. It's like, okay, what do we want our cultural norms to be? What do we want to create as far as rituals or traditions or these like elements of culture that it's really rare we get to like create from scratch, right? And so how do we actually create culture? And so there is a shock, I think, in arriving, but there's also the sense of like ownership and agency over like how do we make the culture that we want to have for this semester.
Is there a typical day? I mean, you've mentioned a couple of things. Does everybody sort of follow the same schedule? Do you all get up at the same time? Do you all go to bed at the same time? What's that like?
The students definitely go to bed later than I do. Okay, go ahead, Nicole.
So I can try to give a general idea. It varies a little bit, but a general day is breakfast is at 7:15. If you are the student there's 2 students who cook every morning. And it varies and rotates. Nate and I, assistant directors, also cook a morning. But if it's your day, you get up earlier than that and make coffee, put out yogurt and cereals if you're feeling adventurous or have the energy for it. Maybe you'll make muffins or eggs or something like that. And then everyone else will just arrive by 7:15. You'll ring a bell and everyone has breakfast together every morning. Then you'll pack up, maybe pack a lunch, maybe jump in the lake real quick first too, and then go to class. And there's one class a day. So maybe you're spending 4 to 8 hours on that subject. So for example, if it's ecology, again, maybe you're packing up, grabbing a rain jacket, and then you're heading out with the professor who is either canoeing across the lake or driving in and meeting you, and you're going either somewhere offsite or you're exploring like the bogs on campus and looking at or not campus, goodness, exploring the landscape that we have access to from the site, looking at sphagnum moss or trade anemones or all these different things, eating lunch out there, coming back at least by 4. Then if you're the ones cooking that night, which you don't cook breakfast and dinner the same night, you pretty much have to jump right in and start preparing. Again, whatever we have access to is what you're going to have your ingredients for. If you aren't cooking, you have some free time and maybe you're just getting some homework done. But maybe you're getting the sauna running or going for a swim or a paddle. A lot of students will play guitar and sing together in the kitchen, providing some music for the folks cooking. And then everyone, again, at 6:30 eats. They kind of ring the bell. Students will walk through what they made that night and share a quote with everyone that they pick out. And after dinner, it's student time. So again, often there's saunaing, there's more singing, there's homework happening. And again, once a week, we'll have that community meeting where Nate and I will just give them space to, again, bring up any concerns, to check in with the values we've set for our community and whether they're being upheld, and just, again, checking in with folks too.
It sounds very similar to my summer camp experience, except there was no homework. But, the bell ringing in the morning and being on KP once a week and that kind of thing. So that's really cool. Did you, as an individual, Nicole, or as your group during your semester, develop any, rituals or traditions that were meaningful for you?
It's hard to answer because in a lot of ways, everything was. Everything is so intentional in the community there. And also you're with everyone so much. There's no, again, as Jake said, there really isn't a lot of personal space or personal time. You can go on your own for a paddle or for a walk, but you don't have this opportunity to kind of put up different faces or show up as you think you should be. You kind of have to show up as you are and create space for other people to also show up as they are. And part of that is learning to be really intentional. And ritual-wise, it's things like saunas, it's different people have different roles that they kind of step into and trade off with, and both learning. I think there's, again, rituals maybe comes to mind when I think of the ways in which everyone found how they can support the community. And again, maybe that some person really, really likes starting fires. And so they're the ones who usually check the wood stoves or start the sauna. Some people are just really good at keeping an eye on the water. And then, saunaing to me was a really beautiful, you don't ever talk about home. That's one place you don't talk about homework. You'd sit and just connect and talk. And I think that really, the face-to-face interactions where you're not having these big distractions, you're not getting pulled into a phone or pulled somewhere else. You really got to know the folks really well and without that idea of who you should be.
That's really cool. Are you still we mentioned before we started recording, you're still in touch and good friends with people you met on the program.
Yeah, a few people and some people not. And I think that's part two, that students leave the semester and learn that they can develop these really sweet, deep relationships and connections. And then that's also okay when they change and people grow in different directions. It's part of life. And I think it can be a hard thing for students coming off the semester, but also a really good thing to realize that it doesn't diminish the value of the relationships they built.
St. Lawrence University, listeners who may not be familiar, it's located in Canton, New York, which is just outside the Blue Line in the northwest of the Adirondacks. Canton's on the St. Lawrence Seaway, right? That's where hence the name St. Lawrence University.
And we're a little bit away from the Seaway, but I think one of the unique things that sets us apart from other universities, we're the gateway to the Adirondacks, but we also have access to St. Lawrence Seaway, Canada, and then this huge park below us. Yeah. And so we're kind of uniquely situated to access both of those kind of resources and areas.
Yeah. And it's a small school. It's 1,900, 1,800 students. Did you know, Nicole, the other students who are on your program already before you got there, or did you meet new people?
Yeah, I only knew one of the person who was going to be on this program. And that's only because we lived in the same freshman dorm. And we had the same first year program together, which St. Lawrence does this first year program where you take classes with the people you live with as a way of building community. But otherwise, I hadn't met anyone. And some of them knew each other. There was a few people who were friends, a couple other people who knew no one. And we had, different people from different parts of the semester or the campus community as well. So again, I was a math major, but environmental studies majors, people who were involved with sororities or fraternities versus theme houses versus all different parts. And so it's kind of a cool way to make connections that people I wouldn't have met otherwise on campus, or maybe wouldn't have spent kind of quality time that I did with.
Jacob, you may not be able to generalize, but, what kind of changes do you see in students over the course of the semester? And is there, and isn't the incident you can think of, without naming names, of somebody who you felt was really transformed by the experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think something I have a hard time sometimes articulating, because it's oftentimes a pretty gradual thing. It's like a one moment like, aha, I'm a different person now, right? It's oftentimes like you get back to campus and these students have, in a semester to reflect on like, wow, what are the patterns that I created and what are the activities I was engaging in on the semester and how are they so different on campus and like, how does that feel, right? And so I think oftentimes it's like a year or 2 or 3 later that these students are now graduating and they're like, wait, like I recognize that like this way I did homework out there, or this intention I put into journaling every day, or this like meditative activity, or this relationship with a tree. Like these are the things that I didn't think were that impactful in the moment maybe, but then, 3 years later, I'm seeing like how valuable that was for me. But I think for me as an administrator and, part of the program, one thing I see with students coming back at me is just like the ability to communicate is drastically improved. They're required to navigate conflict in such a intimate and like intentional way, right? These community meetings. And so their ability to be aware of their own needs and the needs of their community, their ability to communicate those needs, their ability to really speak, and again, this is going to sound maybe a little bit corny for those of you all who don't live in the woods with us, but speak from the heart, right? And really say this is what I actually mean. And let's talk about it. And even if it doesn't feel good for you, let's find some commonality in there. So I think that's a big thing that I see. I think it's also one of the values is people are much more intentional about the way they use technology coming back. As you can imagine, the whole semester without a phone.
I was just going to ask about that.
Yeah, when you get your phone back, you're going to really be like, wait, what is this thing? And I have all this access to all this stimulation that I wasn't used to for 3.5 months. And so I think oftentimes we see students really intentionally reintegrate that in a different way than they maybe used that device before they came on the semester. And I thought it didn't just taking opportunities for students to get outside. Like I see students doing their sit spots after they return to campus. And so they're doing it on our, beautiful St. Lawrence community campus. But they're holding these patterns of this had meaning in my life when I was on the semester. And so how can I kind of reintegrate that back into my processes, back in normal life, quote unquote, normal life.
Nicole, did you experience any kind of Oprah aha moment, or where something really kind of clicked for you that you were like, wow, this is important to me?
A lot of it was gradual and just with spending time with myself without more distraction and with myself, with other people who were also present. I really did develop this sense of who I was and what I valued. And again, I think I just hadn't, there's always, students, I don't think now, but also in 2018, there's so much you're being asked to do and so much kind of within your day and structure. And it's rare that you have time to be just kind of sitting and looking at water or sitting still. And that's something that definitely impacted me. One, I realized that I really like that. And I feel like I'm a better person, both just in my ability to communicate and to have grace and patience when I give myself that time. I think there was this gradual realizing how comfortable I could be with myself, and that learning more about little pieces of myself that maybe I hadn't been aware of, both actions, trends, preferences, but also it's almost like your skin gets a little bit less tight, you can kind of just be. But I think some of the bigger moments where there was big transitions or big shifts was some of the more challenging kind of outdoor aspects of I have a clear memory of trying to go walk to the composting toilet in the middle of the night and being spooked because there was a porcupine. And I had been someone who's afraid of the dark at the time. And so learning to navigate in the dark so much was impactful and really empowering. Same with we have students do solos, but they'll spend 1 or 2 nights out alone somewhere on the Massawepie property. And just the realizing that I can do that and I'm fine. And both I can be with myself for that long and my thoughts, but also I can handle the dark and I can handle setting up this tent. And I think I had a hammock actually, but cooking or not cooking or all these outdoor skills are kind of empowering. And I certainly felt that and took that into a lot of the other adventures I did later in life, both outdoor adventures, but other adventures too of this. Well, if I could do that, I can probably do this.
Yeah. I think that just resonates so much with me. And a semester abroad, no matter where you go, whether it's in the woods or London or Barcelona, that experience does, I think, give you, you have to learn to navigate a different culture on your own. You have to learn to be away from your family. You may have to develop some life skills, but it just seems like what you're describing is so much more intensified and so much bigger. And I love the way you've talked about the community and the communication aspect of it. Because when I think about in the world today, one thing we all could really benefit of is being able to talk to each other better and communicate with each other better. And I love even the little micro effect you're having with that group of students every fall. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, and if I can add there too, I think, we talked about the social culture that develops, but there's also this element of like eco-social culture where we're also trying to invite students to like dive into this ecological culture that they might not be aware of. Like, again, if you're doing your study abroad in London, you're very focused on like, social culture, but we're trying to get students to really think more broadly about what community means and include the non-human species there as well. And again, I think for a lot of folks, that seems like a really radical stance or a radical perspective in this day and age. But I think for us, it's a necessary thing to live a life that is going to sustain into the future, right? We need to be connecting with our neighbors, our dogs, right? In the background there.
I'm so sorry about the dog
it's good.
barking.
These are the people we share space with, right? We should know them. We should be able to listen to them and figure out how to communicate with these non-humans.
I'm curious as to how are students selected for this? Or is it first come, first serve? Is there an interview process?
Yeah, so it's a pretty intense application process where they write essays, and then I interview them with a couple other alums of the program. But yeah, it's a pretty intense application process, and they'll find out if they got in sometime mid-spring, and so they have a chance to prepare. We'll send out the handbook. We'll have meetings with them. This year, we're going to also link up the incoming students with mentors from previous cohorts, and so they'll have an opportunity to talk about what worked well for you, and do you have any advice for me going into this experience. So it's a pretty structured integration into the community.
Yeah, if I can add to that, I'd say, again, we're looking for different people to build a diverse community. And that can mean, different backgrounds, different ethnicities, but also maybe people who've done a ton of backpacking and have grown up in this region versus someone who, again, maybe has never backpacked before, never canoed before. Like the actual hard skills of being in outdoor recreation are what we're looking for. But I'd say something that in general we're looking for is people who are curious, people who are kind of demonstrating that they're going to be willing to jump in and maybe try to hear different viewpoints. And because again, too, so much of this building culture and building community is, these are people that maybe you wouldn't have talked to on campus before, have probably different viewpoints, different ideas. And how can you build a community and communicate and take care of each other when maybe you don't agree with the person next to you, which I think personally is a really important skill. And something that students really gain from doing this program is how can you work together with someone you might not actually initially enjoy spending time with. And then amazingly, they all end up really close and bridging differences and finding ways they can each take part and build a community that they want to be part of.
I'm sure the interview process is really important. Do you do any other, for lack of a better word, psychological testing? Do you do it in Myers-Briggs and you make sure that you're getting the right mix of people? Is there anything a formula for doing that?
I'll say there is no right mix of people. Any mix of people we bring in is going to be the right mix of people for that year, right? So I think no matter who we bring in, that will present unique challenges, and that's kind of the goal, right? The goal is to bring these students together and whatever the unique milieu of like characters and personality traits and backgrounds and whatever that is, that's going to create a really, really cool learning environment, and that's what it's about.
Remind me again how many kids are in the program?
Students,
how many people?
yes,
Sorry,
because they're definitely adults.
Students.
Mostly adults at this point in their life. There's 12 students every fall.
That's intense. That's very cool. for people who want to dig in more, where can they find out about the program on, is the St. Lawrence website, or I think you mentioned to me earlier that you have a Facebook profile and Instagram profile.
Yeah, and I will say, we are active on Instagram at SLU_Adirondack semester. And then on Facebook, we're at St. Lawrence Adirondack semester spelled out. We're people who also live in the woods most of the time in the fall. And so we're not great at Instagram and social media, but we're trying. I think the best way to engage with the real experience of the program is to go on our website. And so if you just Google St. Law U Adirondack semester, and then go to our weekly updates. The students, as part of their Writing the Adirondacks class, produce a weekly blog. And so they'll be like handwriting this blog post, which they'll give their professor will edit it, bring it back to them, and then they'll put it on the website. And it's a really cool way to see the student perspective of what this experience means. And they're outlining the specifics of the day-to-day, but also reflecting on the value. And so I would say if people are interested in learning more, that's a great place to go to see. Yeah.
That's so cool.
And those blogs are all archived so people can look back at different fall semesters. That's neat. That's really neat.
How long has the program been around?
We are 25 years. So I think we started in 99. The first year in the Yurt Village was 2000. And then we skipped a year for COVID. And so I think we're with the years now. So I think we'll be going into our 26th year.
And some of my background research, I could not find another school that does this. And another small liberal arts school in upstate New York I won't name names, but had a similar program, but it sounds like they discontinued it.
Yeah, and I think there's a difference. The immersion that we create is much different than other semesters like this. I think I know the program you're talking about, and it was very much like let's visit and do science. Let's visit these parks. Let's not live deeply with this place. And I think in that way, our program is unique in any program that I've found. I think a lot of times we think of this immersive program as being like a Knowles semester, or like you're going backpacking for a month, but it's very rarely like I'm going to engage with this one place for 3.5 months so intimately.
So much of this is about the experience, the community building, the skill building. What about the hard and cold academic piece of it? Are they graded on this semester? Or like when I did my London Abroad program, it was like pass fail. Talk about the academic program, if you will.
Yeah, Jane, thanks for asking that. It is a really rigorous academic semester. It's, we joke around, it sounds like summer camp, but it's also like full on college. And so when professors are traveling from campus each day, as Nicole said, they're either coming to the Yurt Village to teach there and lecture, or they'll be going on field experiences. And so students are taking a writing class. They'll do everything from creative writing to producing a zine, poetry. They do like an Andrew Goldsworthy art project. They're also doing blog posts. They'll take a natural history of the Adirondacks class. They'll take a land use management, so studying the people who were here from the beginning, the Haudenosaunee, and then also how the Adirondack Park kind of emerged from kind of like white settler colonial folks coming into the area, and we're looking at how land is managed currently. They will take a philosophy of nature class with me. And so doing kind of more wilderness skills, and also, trying to define nature, which is a very hard thing. And we don't actually ever end up defining nature, but it's a fun process. And then the two assistant directors also teach an ethical leadership in the Adirondacks class. And this is the more traditional, how do we teach the technical skills of outdoor recreation? So backpacking, canoeing, planning the trips, food prep, and then also how do we navigate those spaces as leaders? And so students will practice being designated leaders in those spaces as well. Students also get to take a non-credit woodworking class. And so the first half of the semester, they will hand build canoe paddles with all hand tools. And then the second half of the semester, we'll get some power tools in, and we'll say what do you want to make? What are you excited about exploring in this medium? And students oftentimes really love that balance of hands-on physicality with also their academic studies as well. And then the semester ends with an internship. And so students have an opportunity to take 2 to 2.5 weeks, and they'll identify a professional in the Adirondacks they're excited to learn from, and they'll go and stay with that professional. And we've had students do anything from okay, this is what I want to do for a career. How are people doing it in the Adirondacks, and how are they a leader in their community, right? So we'll have folks who go to do physical therapy or journalism with NCPR, or they'll go work at the North Country School or Northern Lights School doing education. And then we'll also have students who are okay, I'm going to go into computer science. I'll never get the chance to be a blacksmith again in my life. I'm going to go be a blacksmith for 2 weeks, and I'm going to really enjoy that. So we've got woodworkers, jewelry makers, blacksmithing. And so some of these more alternative career paths that maybe are not usually associated with these strict academic kind of career pathways, but are still so important to the Adirondack community. And so figuring out, how do these people leaders in their community as well?
That's so cool.
So Nicole, what happens when the students aren't in class? What's going on after class?
Students have a pretty, again, as Jake said, rigorous week, but we try really hard as a director team to protect their Sundays as time for them, which, to be fair, they are probably doing homework for at least some chunk of that day. But it's really whatever they can think of. Again, there's a lot of playing music in the kitchen and writing songs, writing letters to their friends on campus, maybe canoeing across the lake to do some laundry, but also students playing in snow, going to canoe just for the sake of lying in the middle of the lake on their canoe. Students twice this past semester ran marathons to the nearby mountain, Arab, and back. When I was a student, the entire 12 of us portaged a canoe the 12 miles to that mountain and back just for the sake of it. So there's some things that you just get up to for the sake of it. But really, whatever they can, again, board games, art, and sometimes, again, just sitting and looking at the water and enjoying the place that they're in.
If I can also add, Saturdays, we oftentimes do field trips. And so we'll go visit the local farm where we get our cheese and our milk from. We'll go visit Mace Chasm Farm to see how they're raising animals. And that's where we get all of our meat. So shout out to North Country Creamery and Mace Chasm Farms. Also, Kent Family Growers, they produce a CSA for us every year. And so hoping to integrate a visit to their farm in the future. But we'll go rafting on the Upper Hudson. We'll go climbing at the North Country School. And so we try to really engage, what are people doing in the Adirondacks, right? How do we expose students to what folks are doing? And then also, what do you want to do on your days off? What do you want to just really engage with?
It kind of sounds a little bit like ADKTaste.com. Because it's a little bit about the places and the stories and what people are doing here. So that's good. And you guys are not close to Mace Chasm Farm or North Country
Creamery.
North Country Creamery, sorry. So you paddle across the lake, and then there's a vehicle there that takes you. How do you get there?
Hitchhike. That's what you should be doing.
Yeah. Really good bikes.
Hot air balloon.
Yeah. No, we do have vehicles. And again, it's one of the things I think I'd like to reflect more on about the semester is that we are pretty reliant on, fossil fuel technology and moving around the park. And so we do it pretty efficiently. We pack all the students into a 12-passenger van and they go off and do the things. And so, a lot of our food is coming from a pretty distributed area because we're not growing food at Massawepie, obviously, right?
Right.
And so it's something that we, I think, kind of critically reflect on and try to minimize, but also it's the nature of living in this rural area we live in.
We try to map things up too. We get our granola and eggs from the hub in Tupper Lake, and we'll do that when one of us is coming in or with students going on their bi-weekly town trip. And it's nice that they actually know where things are coming from.
Yeah. And I think that's really neat. And something that just really resonated to me is they're living in the Adirondacks sort of in an immersive way, but they're also learning about what it's like to live in the Adirondacks as normal people too. And it's a hard life. And I know I say that a lot on this podcast, but it is a really hard life up here. And I think it's the more that we can, we really try and shine a light on, Triple Jade Green Farm, that is a great baker and they have animals, or Nettle Meadow in Thurman, New York, that makes great cheese. We're, as you are probably familiar, we're in the middle of maple season, or we're almost winding it down actually. So we had a maple farm on, and I mean, even when I decide to buy gas, I go to Stewart's because I'd rather have that money stay in New York State than go to, I don't know, wherever the other chains are located. And I love that you're doing that, that you're getting vegetables from our farmers and meat and cheese and eggs. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, these students are living the Adirondacks. They're eating the Adirondacks. They're drinking the Adirondacks. We're trying to remove all the barriers that they have between how they meet their basic needs, right? So they're getting their own water. They're, hopefully less disconnection between them and their food. Their energy is coming from 100 feet away from where they live.
That's amazing.
Unless you count the sun as being thousands of miles. But again, breaking those barriers down, right?
Well, this has been so fascinating. I could talk to you all day. I have so many questions about this experience, and I hope I have a bunch of really trivial things too I'm dying to know about, but I'm not going to waste our listeners' time or your time with them. But before we release you into the wild again, we end every episode asking our guests about their favorite place in the Adirondacks. And you can't say the Yurt Village, and you can't say St. Lawrence University. And it can be anything. It can be a paddle. It can be a hike. It can be a donut shop. It can be a thrift store. It can be a place that, either you return to frequently and it has a special place in your heart, or you say to people, if they're coming to visit, oh, you've got to go here, or make sure you go to dinner there. I'm going to start with you, Jacob. What's your hidden gem?
Yeah, I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I've got two answers. The first one's Donnelly's ice cream. I'm sure people have said that before. But then the second cheat is it's a little bit outside of the blue line, but on the way to St. Lawrence, if you pass outside the Adirondack Park and go through South Colton and then Colton, the Racket River starts in the heart of the Adirondacks, but then flows north the St. Lawrence Seaway, and it's one of the most dammed rivers east of the Mississippi. And there's this one stretch called Stone Valley that is just like the most magical stretch of river I've ever been to. It's just like cascading down these rocks, and it's beautiful, and you can hike on either side of it. And I think it's like you can do a 9-mile loop around the whole thing, and it's so fantastic, and it's right in our backyard, and that's like the most magical place in this area for me.
I love that. Yeah, Donnelly's actually is one of the most popular pages on our site in the summer. So that doesn't, but nobody's brought it up before, and I'm not familiar with the other place you mentioned, but I'm gonna have to look that up now. Okay, Nicole, you're up next.
Yeah, I'm also going to say river systems in general definitely some of my favorite places. Both at Upper Saranac Lake is an example that's not on site, although on site for our semester is pretty magical. There's a lot of places in the Adirondacks where it's so clear and the water is so calm that you can actually see the reflection of constellations. Like I've been able to see Orion's belt in the lake, like reflecting from the sky. And so then I'll shout out though, Racket River Outfitters is a great place if you don't already have a canoe to rent from, borrow from. They're great people, and we work with them. But also, just finding a way to get out onto the water is one of my favorite things.
Nicole and Jacob, this has been great. I thank you so much for taking time to talk to us about the Adirondack semester. Definitely, listener, in our show notes, we'll have links to the website and the Facebook profile that Nicole and Jacob mentioned. And I bet you're in the process of selecting next fall's class. Yes?
They've actually been selected. So we're, getting them all prepped and ready.
That's awesome. But thank you again, and take care. And maybe we should have you back next year for a wrap up on see how fall 2026 went.
That'd be great. We'd love the opportunity. And thanks for talking with us. Really awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, that was really fun, Steve.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I didn't really have any concept of what the program was. I failed to research it much. I apologize to the listeners if I have more questions when I don't look at the at who it is we're interviewing ahead of time than
all the preparation I prepare, hours I spend making sure that you're up to speed, that you never read. Yeah, I know. You're not fooling me, Steve Reno. Not at all.
I guess that's probably a good look into my career in college as well. So,
all right, listener, I hope you enjoyed this as much as we did. And if this sparked your curiosity, it's a reminder that the Adirondacks are more than a destination. They're a place where people are actively exploring new ways of learning, living together, and connecting to the natural world and to other people. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow ADK Talks wherever you are listening to this podcast, and share it with someone who loves the Adirondacks as much as you do, or someone who's considering where they might like to go to college, or maybe you know somebody at St. Lawrence and you should encourage them to check out the Adirondack semester if that's their jam, as the kids like to say. And for more insights and news about this amazing park we love so much, visit our website, adktaste.com. And if you have a question or a comment, we'd love to hear from you. Drop us a line at info@adktaste.com. We've gotten some really good questions. We're going to have to do a reader mailbag pretty soon. I think we have something scheduled for May. So interesting questions we're getting.
I hope.
All right. Well, thanks for listening. Tune in, and we'll see you on the next episode of ADK Talks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.